All right, everybody, welcome to the podcast. Today we have a great guest, Dr. Andre J. Samuel. Dr. Andre, thank you for coming. How are you?
Good, good. How you doing? Thanks, Roberto, for having me.
Yep, no problem. I'm good. I can't complain. Again, thank you for coming here to the podcast, man. I wanted to just open it up the way I typically do, which is to have my guest just give a opening about themselves. Talk a little bit. Overview. It could be both personal, professional. Just sort of give some background so people that don't know you, they kind of know who you are, what you do, what you're about, and those types of things. So
Sure. Okay, good, cool. Thanks, Roberto. Let's see. My name is Andre Samuel. I'm a biologist. Um, I have a biologist background. I am a researcher. I've worked as a laboratory tech, research associate, and veterinary tech on a number of research projects over the years. I have a Ph.D. in biology. My Ph.D. was focused on drug discovery and trying to find like antibiotics for new drug development and stuff like that. I've just kind of always been like sort of this, nerdy, sort of geeky type kid who enjoyed science and learning how things worked, and was lucky enough to be able to create a career and make a living in enjoying science and exploring science and doing research.
Very nice. So I guess you mentioned you're always kind of like interested in how things work, and that's kind of why you got into it. Can you give a little bit more background? Like what did that look like? Like as you were a kid, like what were the sorts of things you found yourself being into? And now you look back, you're like, okay, it makes sense why I'm where I'm at today.
Yeah, I mean, I was a typical kid. I liked pretty much everything that I think most kids, my age did. But besides that, I mean, I played pickup basketball game, across the street in the neighborhood and stuff like that. I wasn't always good at it, but I played. But for me, like what really got me going was just really exploring nature and the environment, like really having an understanding or trying to have an understanding of how things worked. And so um, if something in the house broke, like electronic wise, like I would just take a screwdriver and, start taking it apart and looking at it to try to figure out how it worked and see if I could fix it. I mean, I just had that sort of curious mind at all times. I remember going to garage sales or yard sales in the city and wanting, being attracted to like these old microscopes or chemistry kits that were there in the yard sales and like being excited about having that stuff. So, I mean, and then of course I played video games and stuff like that. So I've always been a hardcore gamer. Back in the day, we used to have to go to arcades to play most of the games unless you had an Atari or something in the house, which I eventually got. But, I was just always curious and wanted to know how things worked. And that was what it was like growing up. I had the Smithsonian because I grew up in DC. So a lot of times, the weekends were spent going to the Smithsonian, going to the National Zoo, checking out the Air and Space Museum. Which were wonderful resources because they're all free, right? So it didn't cost you anything to go there. All you had to do was like jump on the bus or the subway, and you could get up in there. And it was a great way for me to spend my time because I learned a lot. I think about my environment, about animals, and about space travel and stuff like that at an early age, being able to access those resources.
Very nice. Yeah, my wife and I, we love going to DC because of that, because of all the museums and all those
Right.
classes they have there. So that's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
cool. You mentioned that you were always curious about how things work, and if you had to, probably trying to put stuff together and that type of stuff. And I'm not just saying this because I am an engineer, but it kind of sounds like you're describing a typical engineer. Uh, so
Right. Right.
curious, why did you go the biology route as opposed to like engineering? You know, just curious, or maybe I don't know if you knew what engineering was, right? Because a lot of us that come from first generation families don't really know what a lot of careers are, or really know people that are in those careers. So kind of
Right.
just curious, you know, how you decided to go down that route.
So that's a good question. So for me, I think for me, I always loved animals, right? And so when I came out of high school, I went to Tuskegee University as a pre-vet major. I was going to be a veterinarian. That was originally what it was, what my plans were. I think we ended up segueing into biology because there was a lot of biology that was required in order for me to complete, my program as a pre-vet major. And so I started to take things like embryology and microbiology and botany, as well as like animal sciences and stuff like that, and just really started to kind of fall in love with the connection that all animals have essentially on this environment, and then realized that biology was really the study of all of that. Really, it's the study of life. It was the study of everything that I had this huge interest in. And believe it or not, some engineering is involved in that. Uh, I I think that's how I ended up going on the biology route. Um, I don't know why I never thought about engineering, especially with, my sort of innate ability or natural ability to be able to just like take electronics apart and try to figure out how to put them together and stuff like that, right? Like, I mean, even now, like if my PlayStation 4 went down, right? And I was like, oh, that's the hard drive. So instead of chucking it and buying a new one, right, I'm gonna go to Best Buy and I'm gonna pick out a new hard drive and I'm gonna go ahead and switch it out. So I've always been able to sort of like kind of figure those things out. But I've always just had this passion for animals and understanding how animals interact with the environment, and I think that just was what took over, and that's how I ended up gravitating naturally towards biology. But I do a fair amount of engineering in biology, right? Like trying to engineer experiments. There's genetic engineering, so we're actually taking genes and placing them in from one organism to another with the idea of engineering and designing a specific outcome. And a lot of times I do CAD and 3D printing to try to, create some sort of prototype that I've developed in the lab. So there's quite a bit of engineering there as well.
That's very interesting. So do you
Mhm.
have in the lab, do you have like engineers that work with you? Like chemical engineers, or I don't know. I know there's also like biological, or there's some sort of field of engineering in that space. So do you have any engineers that work with you, or is it mostly just you uh doing that side of it?
So yeah, I mean, we have a number of people on the staff that have a number of different backgrounds, and some of them have engineering backgrounds, and some of them will work on more physics-based or engineering-based programming that we do, which includes like some of our NASA-based stuff, right? So we go to NASA every year and get some stuff, and so there's a bit of engineering there, and then we have undergrads that may be engineering majors that work and develop this curriculum for us. But we also have biologists, and then we also have biochemists, and then we also have environmental scientists. It really doesn't matter what your specific discipline is. I think that cohesively or collectively, we're all scientists one way or another. So you as an engineer, as a science, you're a scientist. I'm a scientist. The environmentalist is a scientist. We're all taking data, right? And we just take data and we look at that data and then we try to figure out what the next best move is, right? And whatever that plan is an experiment, and hopefully you get the positive results you want, right? So if you're building something, whether you're building a new structure or a familiar structure, it's still really sort of taking this data and making a decision as to what beams to use, what angle to use it at, and what materials to use. But when you're done and you actually build it, it's still essentially an experiment, right? And a lot of times you have to make changes as you go along. And that's the same thing with biology and science and research. Sometimes we start these experiments and we have to change them as they go along. It's all an iterative process. We all are essentially scientists trying to figure something out.
That's very true. I didn't think of it about it that way. But that's actually definitely true. You know, like you mentioned, there's a lot of things that you know you do constantly. I don't know. I'm an electrical engineer, right? So I build power plants, and you know, generally power plants are all the same, but there's always different aspects and things that come across that are different that you may be trying for the first time, and you're hoping it works, and you know, there's a high, you know, you do obviously your due diligence to make sure there's a high probability it does, but things could always go wrong or not turn out to be the way that you expect them to be, you know. So that's a
Exactly.
good point.
Exactly. Yeah. As an electrical engineer, that's dope. So like here's another example of like how you can, cross disciplines work together. Like, we work on creating batteries that are powered solely by bacteria, right? So the biological aspect of us and the genetic engineering side of us allowed us to engineer a species that can feed one species that can produce some power. But then that's the extent of sort of our wheelhouse, right? Then what we would do to develop that further is we would collaborate with an electrical engineer or someone with a engineering or mechanical engineering or electrical engineering background to help further develop that battery, right? And help us with the, voltage potential. What can we do with, amps and milliamps and wattage? Like, how do we change all of this and how do we design a circuit that could actually be powered by this, biological specimen, stuff like that. So it becomes very collaborative. You're never really sort of stuck in one discipline, which I think is the awesome thing about, what we do.
That's pretty cool. So, are you working actively on that type of battery, or is it something that you have like a prototype at or something? Or
So it's like so yes and no. So we have our students, our participants, work on developing. We give them the basic science and knowledge that is widely published and uh, readily available. And then we say, hey, here's the basic science behind it. You're going to build one based on the basic science. Now, what can you do, or what can you think of that you can take out of this knowledge now and create yourself, and try to give them time to prototype it and develop it themselves.
okay, nice.
Yeah,
That's cool. That's dope. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
maybe one day I'll go and see if I can check out some of that work because it sounds pretty cool.
yeah. You should definitely come by sometime. It's dope.
So I guess just I wanted to ask you, you know, so far throughout your career, what has been the most challenging part of your career?
Wow. I think honestly, the most challenging part of my career has probably been it's kind of hard because I feel like I've had a couple different careers, right? Through over I don't know. It's a good question. I would say probably the most challenging part maybe has been getting here, to be quite honest. It can be a challenge, right? I mean, especially as a minority in STEM and as a Black person in the sciences. And with you can just often deal with a number of obstacles that can um, seem like they're in the way, right? And you usually have to get through quite a bit. I would say getting here was probably the hardest thing. I feel like once I got here, there are challenges and there are difficulties associated. I mean, I run a nonprofit, right? So there are challenges in trying to get funding. There are challenges with staff, right? There's challenges with, making sure customers are happy and there are those types of things, but I never look at them as like, oh my God, like um, this is like the one thing that I can't deal with, or that this is really such a hard challenge that I wouldn't want to do this work anymore. So for me, I would say, the biggest challenge has been really just getting there, because it's hard, dude. It's hard, and you want to accomplish this goal, and you usually want to do it quickly, but you got to be a little patient at the same time, right? Because it takes time. And jumping through the hoops to get there. The PhD process is a challenging process, right? It requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of long hours. It requires long nights. It requires a lot of reading, a lot of writing, and then a lot of experimenting. And then oftentimes a lot of going back to the drawing board and saying, oh, that didn't work. What do I do now? So that is a challenge, I think. Biggest challenge of all.
Right. So by getting there, you're referring to kind of just like the whole like educational process, right? Like going through college,
Yes.
going
Yeah.
through undergrad, your
Yeah.
PhD.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess during that time, was there ever like a instance or instances where you sort of felt like you couldn't do it, like you were just about to give up, and like why am I doing this? I'm just gonna go, I don't know, be an artist or something. Not not that, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna go into this career, you know what I mean? Did those thoughts ever go through your mind or no?
um, I want to say kind of yes and no. Early on, maybe yes, right, right. So I remember early on, when I was waiting tables and putting myself through undergrad, right, and I had thought about like, you know what, these guys at the restaurant think I would make a good manager. I could start making X amount of dollars right away instead of continuing to go through, right, school and stuff like that. Maybe I should consider doing that. And then I was like, no, I got way too much more potential in me to do that, right? And this is not what I love. This is not what I want to do. So I didn't want. It was a brief moment where that happened. But I think once I got on that train and started, just going down the right track as far as my education is concerned. Like I didn't really look at any of the other stops along that route. I always kept looking ahead. Um, but when I got to my PhD program, I think I second guessed whether or not I should have been there, like my first year. I knew I always wanted to do it, but like I think my first year of my PhD program, I asked my mentor as I was preparing for a big presentation. I was like, "You sure I belong here? Like, are you sure I'm supposed to be doing this?" And she was like, "You should never ask yourself that ever again. Like, you absolutely belong here and wouldn't be here if you wouldn't." And then that after that, boom, I was just kind of off to the races, and went straight through with my PhD with no reflection as to whether or not I belonged there or not. I knew, that was where I was supposed to be, even though I was the only Black person in the whole department.
So have you ever heard of imposter syndrome before?
Of course, yeah, 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 yeah.
So do you feel like you've experienced it? Do you feel like that situation that you just described was a form of imposter syndrome? Have you experienced it, even after that, at that point, once you were actually working, in the field, after college?
I would say that was my very brief moment of dealing with imposter syndrome. But I think it immediately after that, it never popped up again. And I never really doubted um, whether or not I was in the right place ever again after that. And I don't know, it was really weird. It just felt like I had never felt that way prior to that moment. And I'd never felt that way after. But I think for me, it was such a brand new experience, right? This was something that I had never experienced before. I mean, I experienced taking classes, right, and exams, um, but I had never experienced like doing a presentation in front of a board of PhD scientists and presenting my argument for research. That was brand new. I had always done research that people told me to do, right? Like I worked on research projects and they're like, okay, here's what you're going to do today. You're going to do this experiment, that experiment. This was my first time ever saying, hey, I formulated this rationale and this experiment, and this is what I think my goal is, and this is what I hope to accomplish at the end of this for a board of scientists. That was, I think, what brought that moment in. But then once I got through that, I was like, all right, yeah, I'm in. I'm here for this.
And no, and that's good to hear because everybody has as a first generation person of color, minority. I think most people have it, almost everybody, but everybody has a different level, right? Like some people, like yourself, like you said, like myself, generally, always been pretty confident. But there are times throughout the journey where you're kind of questioning yourself, like, damn, like, should I really be here? And for me, it was the same thing, right? I was in college. I think if one of my first episodes, I kind of said the story where I had like a 1.6 GPA my first semester in
Oh
college.
wow. Yeah.
And at that point, I was really doubting myself, like, damn, like, can I really do this? Should I be here? And I had to make that decision. Do I want to keep going, or am I going to switch careers? And I said no. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this done. And then from then, I put my head down, and I was able to get through college, improve my grades, graduated with honors. So came from the
That's
bottom
nice.
and made it to a good place. So
Yeah, yeah. That's what's up. That's what's
yeah,
up.
but
And
like
I had a similar story. I mean, when I told you I started at Tuskegee, but when I left Tuskegee, my GPA was like a 1.6, 1.7. So I had to go back and start over like you did. So, that's what's up. That's what's up.
yeah, man, similar story. So I like it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I guess throughout your journey then, so we kind of talked about like the downside, right? Like the most challenging part, and we touched on the imposter syndrome. What would you say has been the most memorable part of your career up to this point?
I think that's easy. I mean, the most memorable part of my career has been being able to, I think, touch the lives of um, students who have come through uh, the doors of the Citizen Science Lab and had never really considered a career in science before coming and seeing them sort of light up and see kids from our own communities and Black and brown faces get excited about science in a way that you don't normally see in our communities. Um, that's the best thing for me, right? Seeing like students who have graduated high school who are now, juniors and seniors at four-year colleges and universities who are finishing their first, degree in STEM, science, biology, environmental sciences, or whatever. That is, I think, that the highlight for me of this career. Absolutely, absolutely.
So how does it feel though? Like seeing people come through, the program, like you said, like from high school, and then kind of see them get to college and pursue like a STEM career, STEM field, and then ultimately finish, and go on to do big things. Like how does it feel like from your point of view, kind of being able to see somebody's growth that way? Because I don't know if you had somebody like that growing up that was kind of like watching you as like a kid grow up to be, to where you got to be.
Mhm.
Now that you're in that position, you're able to see someone who was once in your shoes. Like, how does that feel?
Um, it is a very joyous feeling. I mean, it's a feeling of joy in the sense that it's a joy in purpose, right? It's a joy in understanding that you have impact. And then I think that we all should understand that we have impact, right? Like one way or another. But being able to make positive impact is just a great feeling. I don't, it's a feeling of joy. It's to be able to look at someone and say that they're doing something that they now enjoy, and you were able to help them along that journey. Um, and it gives you a feeling of gratitude too, because um, you're grateful for the ability to be able to do it. Because I mean, not everybody has made it, right? Like, yeah, and while we've had similar stories, and while you and I have similar stories, there's probably someone out there who's had a similar story but didn't make it through like we did, right? And so you have a lot of gratitude for the fact that you were able to use your experiences to help somebody else make it through, and not fall to the side and not be able to accomplish their goals and achieve their goals.
That's very true. And like even for me being in the field, one of the things I do enjoy the most is when I'm able to, be a part of events or programs where you kind of go to the community. you talk to the kids, you're able to have a program where you might do like engineering activities with them, show them the opportunities that there are in the fields. And it's tough, right? Like if you grow up in an environment where you don't really have um, people doing big things, that you can kind of look up to and be like, oh, what do you do? And then kind of like start learning, getting curious, and then maybe possibly getting into it. Then it's hard to get into a lot of these fields, So just kind of being able to like talk to people, talk to kids, like younger kids, mentor them, give them advice, show them the opportunities, show them, how well people get paid. You know what I mean? And these
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it makes a big difference, And it's stuff
Yeah.
that like I know I wish I had growing up. I didn't. Luckily, I got to where I am, but I could have also went a completely different route, So yeah,
Yep. That is true, brother. That is true.
yeah. So after you got your PhD, um, what was sort of your road like after getting your PhD? Like, did you go work at a lab somewhere? Did you work for a company? Like, what did that sort of look like after getting your PhD?
That's a good question. So after getting my PhD, I knew that I was going to end up creating the Citizen Science Lab really sort of as I graduated. I was lucky where I was able to leave uh, graduate school and within 6 months be able to start my own program and eventually my own company. Um, that's not the normal course, right? For someone who finishes their PhD in the sciences, usually you go into what's called a postdoc, where you go work under someone in a lab and learn to refine your research skills in the laboratory a little bit more and sort of quote unquote put in your dues, right? Sort of like a residency after you graduate medical school or something like that. But I didn't do that. What I did do was I worked for a company for about 6 months. Um, it was a veterinary company, and I ran a series of veterinary testing labs. And I did that for 6 months while we waited for the funding to come in to allow me to create what we now know today as the Citizen Science Lab. I was lucky. I started a mentorship program on the campus of Duquesne University when I was working on my PhD. And so the campus program was designed to bring high school kids to the labs, have them do science experiments, and get them excited about science. And we just did that once a year during the summer. And I did that during my entire PhD. And then one of the professors who helped me get that started said, hey, this is what you're doing is really good. Um, we should get some funding to create this kind of program off campus and make it a separate entity. And we'd like you to be the one to start it and create it. And so that's actually how I ended up being able to, create my own program 6 months out of grad school. And that 6 months was really just a waiting period for the grant to come in. And once it came in, $500,000 were turned over to me, and I was able to create this dream, what we call the Citizen Science Lab today.
Damn, that's awesome. So did you always know you wanted to go the entrepreneurial route, or
No.
your own?
Well, you know what? If I think about it for real, yeah. Because when I wanted to be a veterinarian, I was like, one day I'm gonna open up my own veterinary clinic, right? So that was the goal behind me being a vet, right? I didn't want to be a vet for someone else. I wanted to be a vet and open up my own clinic. And the reason why I wanted to do that was because down the street from me, I had two Black veterinarians that had their own clinic and they went to Tuskegee. So that's how I got connected with Tuskegee and motivated to go to Tuskegee and be a vet and all of that. So yeah, I mean, it's just, that's just organically how things work. It's kind of wild, but yeah.
Damn, that's pretty cool, man. Because
Yeah, yeah.
it's tough, right? Like being an entrepreneur in like let's say the STEM or a professional field, right? Like, you see like entrepreneurs like in more of the more general, the more common businesses and industries. But when it
Hmm.
comes to like being like a scientist or an engineer, you don't really see that many people who are entrepreneurs within that field, and kind of grow themselves through that same avenue. So that's pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, you don't see a lot of them, but there are a lot of them, believe it or not, right? Like, I mean, you know, there are a number of them. Unfortunately, there are not as many of us that are black and brown, but there certainly are a number of folks who have certainly done a lot of startups in the biotech industry. But yes, we certainly were the first ones to do what we're doing now.
Mhm.
We were the first ones in Pittsburgh to do this, and it was scary. It was scary, but it was fun.
Cool, cool. So, Dr. Andre, so where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? If you were to
Oh
bring a
wow.
magic crystal ball and just, where do you see?
Mm. I will tell you, I more than likely see myself probably teaching somewhere at a university in addition to running the citizen science lab. And I think I see myself um, probably running another company, creating or running another company. I have some ideas for some other things that I'd like to get started and going, which would be separate entities and companies separate from the nonprofit, the Citizen Science Lab. But I have some ideas that I'd like to develop and try to bring to market. So hopefully in 5 years that will be up and running.
Are you able to share a little bit of those ideas, or the top secret?
Yeah, no, not at this moment. I'll say they have to do with renewable energies. I can put that out there. So yeah, 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 yeah. Possible renewable energies. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm in the
Hmm.
renewable energy space right now, so I think that's pretty interesting. So we might have to talk a little bit more after.
We might have to. We might have to.
After that's pretty cool. So, I guess what motivates you, right, to kind of just keep growing and advocating for STEM, from your point of view?
Well, I think, there are a number of things that motivate me, but certainly, I think the first thing is my love for it and then my love for sharing it motivates me. But then, also um, just knowing um, that the change and the impact that we can make with the youth and the students and the adults and the participants that come through, that keeps me going. I have a strong sense of creativity that keeps me going. I like to create things. I like to, um, take on new problems and try to develop new ways to take on those challenges and solve those problems. The world has a lot of potential to develop a lot of technological breakthroughs. I mean, the stuff that we see now and today, right? I mean, this is just the beginning, right? I mean, if you think about where we were 10 years ago, there's stuff that we have today that you couldn't think of 10 years ago, right? And then the 10 years prior. So, what we have in store for the future and what we can develop using science, technology, engineering, and math, right? And art also keeps me going, right? Like what we can create in the future is limitless. And I love looking forward to those possibilities.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, man. Like where science, how it's grown, and how things just continue to grow and evolve and make the world a better place. It's interesting, and especially when you think about the future. And it's like we're already so advanced now, right? Can you imagine like another 10, 20 years? You see a lot of the new technologies that are coming out now, like with artificial intelligence and just all sorts of stuff. Renewable energy, everything that's just sort of kind of being developed now. So imagine in like 5 or 10 years how those things will be, and then at that point, by then those things will be kind of like like old news. Now they're going to be thinking about whatever the newest thing is. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That is true, man. That is true. That keeps me excited, right? Like, what are we going to? I mean, come on. We didn't even think when cell phones first came out. Nobody thought about an iPhone. You know what I'm saying? And like, look at how it changed the industry, right? And then just imagine what's going to come next after the iPhone. Like, I mean, it's kind of crazy. Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna be residents of every planet. Probably that's probably gonna be the next future thing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I hope I live to see it. I don't know if I'll be going, but I'd love to see other people go.
So Dr. Andre, if you could give this, kind of like probably one of my last questions for you. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but
Mhm,
if you could give somebody some sort of advice who's interested in pursuing a STEM career, and
mhm.
you know whether they want to just work at a company, and they want to be, I don't know, they want to work for Google or whatever their interests are. They want to be a doctor. What advice would you give them? And it doesn't necessarily have to be that, right? They could also be an entrepreneur, have their own business, have their, like, what sort of advice would you give somebody with that respect?
Sure. I think if I could, the most important piece of advice that I could give, I think, would be to be tenacious, be determined, don't let anything get in your way. There will always be challenges. No one will ever have a smooth ride without any bumps, right? I mean, you can go long periods of smooth and have that smooth ride, but at some point you're going to hit a pothole or something's going to be in the road, right? You got to be ready for it, but you also got to realize that it's temporary. And as long as you continue to push through, you can get over that and you can get back on track and go through with your original plans. And modified plans don't necessarily mean, that your plans are over. So that's what I would say. Just be determined, keep going, whatever comes your way, face it, deal with it. Once you're done dealing with it, don't forget to get right back on track and continue, heading on the way that you were headed. Don't let anyone keep you from doing that. Yeah. Yeah.
No, you're on a roll, man. I'm gonna let you keep going. Keep going.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, that's really it. That's really it. I'll say one more thing though. I'll say if you're with, if you don't have the support that you need from friends or loved ones to, help you accomplish your dream, don't let that stop you either, right? Like, not everyone really understands what it takes for you to do what you need to do to follow your career, right? I don't have a lot of family members who understood what it took for me to get a PhD or what it took for my wife to get her law degree, right? Like, so when you're coming out, like, especially if you're first or second gen, and not so far removed from the struggles, that your family has had, a lot of times they don't really know how to support you as a student. And that can be challenging and difficult. So make sure you find a mentor who is familiar with the process and who can help you out with that process as well.
I fully agree with that. I think that the mentor, having a mentor, somebody who's been there, that's the key, man.
Yeah. I mean, I had some mentors, man. I mean, big shout out to Bill Jenneret and Alan Siedler and Nancy Tron and a number of folks who like just served as mentors for me. But there's no way I'd be as successful as I am at this and the Citizen Science Lab with folks like my mentor Bill Jenneret, right? And like, he probably doesn't even know that I look at him as a mentor, right? I probably never even said the words to him like, "You are my mentor," but you are, right? And you can have mentors without having that sort of official relationship, right? A mentor is someone that you go to and look up to and get advice from. And when you try to model things that you want to be successful, you model after what that person does, right? Or has done. And that can also serve as a mentor, or that becomes a mentorship relationship, I think.
Very true, man. That's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have those informal mentors, and
Yeah.
they're just as important as someone, even if you do have a formal mentor, the people that you kind of look up to and you're able to see and kind of follow in those footsteps are just as important. So,
Yeah.
but Dr.
Indeed.
It's been a pleasure, man. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. And what's your handle on social medias? Is Dr.
Oh,
Afro?
yeah. You can find me on social medias at Dr. Afro 71, Dr. Afro 71.
Okay, and you're on Instagram, right?
That's
Anywhere else?
Instagram, Twitter,
Okay.
and did you? Oh, I think.
Yeah, I heard
Okay,
you.
you got me. Okay, all right.
But again, no, man, I appreciate it. Thank you, and we'll be in touch, man. We got more to talk about. So
Indeed. I'd love to do this again, and anytime you want to reach out, Roberto, please feel free to do so.
we'll do,
Thank
man.
you, brother.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.